What's happening, my cool cats? Welcome back to Pokemon Month. Welcome back, my friends. It is time for another top 10 video, and this time we're going to be taking a look at a group of Pokemon that I absolutely love. Now, before I made this top 10 list, I started thinking to myself, Pokemon, really, what's the deal with these creatures in the first place? If you guys don't actually know, it's based on the original Pocket Monster games from Japan, and that also got me thinking. Pocket Monster. Typically, a monster is defined as an imaginary creature which is often large and a lot of the times frightening, and a lot of Pokemon can be placed into this category. And while a lot of them are based on real-world animals, they tend to walk that fine line between being an imaginary creature and a real living animal. And I started to think, there's a lot of Pokemon which are based on cats and dogs, and I decided to do my top 10 list on my favorite cat and dog Pokemon. And today we're going to take a look at some of my favorite fuzzy felines from the series. Now, just a couple of ground rules actually going into this list. I need to emphasize that there really isn't a cat Pokemon. A Pokemon is simply that. A Pokemon. It's a monster. They can superficially look like a cat, but that doesn't necessarily make them a cat. So there are going to be a few choices on this list which are going to be borderline a little strange, but keep in mind this is my list, I make the rules. These are essentially my top 10 favorite Pokemon which superficially look like cats. Some of them more than others. If you guys have a favorite cat-looking Pokemon, make sure to tell me what they are in the comments section below. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. These are my top 10 favorite cat Pokemon. Coming in at number 10 is the electrified lion, Luxray. This may come as a shock, but it's really difficult to come up with brand new Pokemon designs, so we're going to see a lot of repeating things here. And that's safe to say that there are a lot of lion Pokemon, but one of my absolute favorite, without a doubt, has to be Luxray. Despite its overall dark appearance, this is a pure electric type Pokemon in the final evolved forms of both Shinx and Luxio. I mostly like Luxray for its incredibly intimidating appearance and the wonderful combinations of black, blues, and yellows, which totally emphasize the fact that this is an electrical beast. If Pyroar is Mufasa, then Luxray is Scar. Ultimately though, I like this Pokemon just because of the way it looks, but damn if it don't look awesome. Reading your mind at number 9 is the psychic duo, Meowstic. It's no question that the internet is absolutely obsessed with cat bullshit. You could definitely see that with the introduction of Esper, the pre-evolved forms of Meowstic. Just look at this thing's creepy eyes as it constantly stares into the very depths of your soul, until it eventually evolves into Meowstic. What's most interesting about Meowstic, of course, is that it has very distinctive gendered forms. You have a male and you have a female. Basically, the main difference being the poofs on top of their head and their color scheme. But these are two Pokemon which were definitely designed to work together. And I think one of the best examples of seeing these things work together is not exactly in the games, but more so in the Pokemon anime series. There's a fantastic episode where Ash is battling against Olympia, and his Frogadier and his Talonflame are fighting against a duo Meowstic team, which really show why these two work so well together. They're cute, they're cuddly, and they'll completely turn your mind into mush. Coming in at number 8 is the cool and blue Suicune. We have finally reached the very first Pokemon on the list, which could be a cat and it could also be a dog all at the same time. A part of the legendary beast trio, a lot of people have always tried to decide if these things are cats or dogs, and it's still sort of up in the air, and while they definitely lean a little bit more towards the canine side, I've always sort of viewed Suicune as this really cool leopard, jaguar, cheetah-esque creature. You can definitely see a lot of that in its design, but Suicune is definitely one of the most royal and regal looking of the legendary Pokemon, and has certainly always been one of my favorites, if not my favorite water-type legendary. Suicune is incredibly famous for being the mascot of Pokemon Crystal, not to mention being an actual playable character in Pokémon Tournament, where it's an absolute powerhouse. And speaking of the legendary beasts, right here at number 7 is the ferocious fire beast, Entei. Again, very much like Suicune, this is a Pokemon which could be a dog or a cat, but I've always sort of envisioned Entei as sort of like this grand royal lion of fire. And very much like Meowstic, the main reason that I've always remembered Entei is from the Pokemon anime series. In particular, the third Pokemon movie, which, in my humble opinion, might actually be the best Pokemon movie in terms of animation and story. And despite the fact that Suicune was the mascot of Pokemon Crystal, Entei has always sort of been like the default leader of the Beast Trio. He always seems to be front and center, and it's kind of easy to see why. I mean, his design is so incredibly unique, taking a lot of combination from lions and even those old lion statues that you see in China. And just like Suicune and Raikou, I absolutely love the subtle designs of this creature. The fact that you have this billowing smoke coming out of its back, which is actually just its fur, with all of these craggy spikes, which are something like a volcano. This is basically the living embodiment of fire. For me personally, it was really tough to choose between Entei and Pyroar, as I definitely see them as the fire lions of the series, but I gotta give the edge to Entei. He's just way too badass. Meeting us at number 6 is the new cat on the block. I'm talking about Linton. In just under a month, we will finally get to play Pokemon Sun and Moon, and we already know a lot about the starters from the game. The fire starter is known as Linton, who is this just adorable looking fire cat who eventually evolves into Torracat, who is essentially just a slightly bigger version of Linton, but he also has an interesting feature. He has this weird little fire sac underneath his neck, which is actually what it uses to create all of its fire-based techniques, as well as being a nice little nod to the fact that this thing is a house cat, which wears a bell around its neck. Now, they haven't officially revealed what the final evolution of Linton and Torracat is going to be, but I know that the leaks are out there and eventually we're going to be able to see this thing in full force. And if the leaks are true, its final evolution is just plain awesome looking. I know a lot of people are really dogging on the fact that it's another bipedal fire starter, which could potentially have the secondary typing of fighting, although I seem to see it leaning a little bit more towards the dark type. I have to admit, I love the final evolution design. That being said, I'm completely satisfied by Linton and Torracat. Linton in particular is just absolutely adorable, and I'm sure is going to sell tons of merchandise. And as far as cats on this list go, Linton is basically the perfect representation of a house cat. He fits the bill perfectly. Aside from the fact that his furballs can inadvertently cause a forest fire. Next up at number 5 is another brand new Pokemon, the legendary Solgaleo. Solgaleo is, without a doubt, the coolest looking lion Pokemon from the entire series. I have to admit, when I first saw the mascot for Pokemon Sun, I was a little disappointed. I felt that they were getting kind of lazy with the designs. But now that I've had a couple of months to sort of examine this monster and see what it's truly capable of, I have fallen in love with Solgaleo. This thing just looks so cool, and I love the fact that its typing is not what you would expect it to be. When I first saw this thing, I'm like, oh yeah, mascot of Pokemon Sun, it has got to be a fire type, which will ultimately make Pyroar completely useless and unnecessary. But no, Solgaleo has gone the extra mile. This Pokemon, believe it or not, is a psychic steel type. I did not see that coming, and honestly, this makes it amazing. Not to mention its design is just absolutely perfect. Incredibly intimidating and legendary looking. I especially love the design of its face, which has this weird galaxy-like thing going on in its forehead, very similar to its counterpart Lunala. I can't wait to learn a little bit more about this legendary Pokemon, and so far, it's definitely impressed me with its badass design, not to mention it has a very awesome signature move known as the Sunsteel Strike, which manages to attack just about anything with full force without even having to worry about the abilities of those Pokemon, making this one hell of a powerhouse kitty. Holding down the fort at number 4 is Meowth. Whenever I think of Pokemon, there are always 3 that pop into my head. Gengar, who just so happens to be my absolute favorite, Pikachu, the effective mascot of the series, and Meowth. And the main reason for that has got to be the anime version of the series. Meowth has officially become a pop culture icon by appearing not only in the anime series, but also being one of the unique Pokemon from Generation 1 who are going to receive an Alolan form in Pokemon Sun and Moon. That's right, Meowth is getting a makeover, and he's being transformed into a Dart type, and this has made me fall in love with this Pokemon all the more. I really don't have much of an opinion on its evolved form Persian. I've just always been attached to Meowth, personally. Not to mention the Alolan Persian, I actually don't have a problem with whatsoever. I know a lot of people are hating on this thing, calling it Garfield, making it seem like it's just a dumb, fat-faced evolution of Alolan Meowth, but I think it's pretty damn funny looking, and it certainly doesn't diminish my love of Meowth at all. Meowth's overall design takes a lot of inspiration from the Japanese lucky cats, which are these little cat statues which supposedly bring people good fortune. And Meowth has certainly brought a lot of good fortune to the Pokemon franchise, making multiple appearances in the games, spin-offs, and even being still one of the key stars of the Pokemon anime series, the ultimate mascot of Team Rocket. And as far as I'm concerned, Meowth has got to be one of my favorite characters from the Pokemon anime series. I'm not a die-hard fan of the cartoon, I don't even really watch it all that often, but I can always count on Meowth for a good laugh. Coming in at number 3 is the genetically modified monster, Mewtwo. Okay, I know, I am definitely cheating on this one big time, but Mewtwo is awesome and clearly takes a lot of inspiration from cats and feline creatures. A lot of that having to do with his overall long tail and pointy ears. But a lot of this inspiration mostly comes from the fact that he's cloned from the Pokemon known as Mew, who also has a lot of cat-like characteristics. It's hard for me to not like Mewtwo as he's one of my absolute favorite Pokemon. He's definitely my favorite legendary Pokemon, and I tend to use him in the games as often as I can, despite the fact that they are banned from many tournaments, and the fact that when I use them when I'm playing against friends, they get really super pissed off. But I love Mewtwo! He's fantastic! Definitely one of the biggest pop culture icons from the Pokemon series, being the star of the very first Pokemon movie, basically being the ultimate prize in the original games, and kicking all sorts of ass in Smash Brothers. But the inspiration from Mewtwo had to have come from Mew. And that brings us to number 2. That's right, coming in at number 2 is the original mythical Pokemon, Mew. As I explained with Mewtwo, this Pokemon takes a lot of inspiration from cats and felines, despite the fact that he doesn't look like your standard cat. Nostalgia has certainly played a big factor in the fact that Mew is this low on the list. I've always been fascinated by this Pokemon, despite the fact that Arceus is seen as sort of like the god of the entire Pokemon universe. I've always considered Mew a little bit higher up on the food chain. Chalk it up to nostalgia, I've just really always loved Mew. And finally, here we are, coming in at number 1. My favorite Pokemon that resembles a cat is the electrified legendary Raikou. Unlike Suicune and Entei, Raikou without a doubt takes its inspiration from cats, in particular the saber-toothed tiger. And I don't know about you guys, but saber-toothed tigers are freaking awesome. Based on one of my absolute favorite extinct animals from the Ice Age, Raikou is just plain awesome. Everything from its design to its overall abilities in battle. A lot of the times I feel that Raikou is undercut when compared to Suicune and Entei, who always seem to be front and center, with Raikou just sort of hanging out in the back. I mean, Suicune has had a lot of time devoted to him in the games and the anime, and the same goes for Entei. And while Raikou certainly did have an anime special devoted to him, it really isn't all that special, but Raikou has always appealed to me. I've always loved the design of this creature, and again, just like Entei and Suicune, it has a very unique design, emphasizing the fact that this is indeed an electric-type Pokemon. The slick yellow coloring, the black stripes, not to mention that weird fur that's coming off of its back, which looks like a thundercloud. Those incredibly sharp teeth, those piercing red eyes. Raikou is just plain awesome, and easily my favorite Pokemon that looks like a little pussycat. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was my top 10 list of favorite Pokemon that look like a cat. It was certainly hair-raising, and I'm really interested to see what you guys thought about my list, but I'm actually more interested to hear from you guys. Do you guys have a favorite Pokemon that resembles a cat or has cat-like features? Are you excited to use all of the brand new cat Pokemon appearing in Pokemon Sun and Moon? What do you think of the brand new Linton and Solgaleo? And don't worry, dog fans, we will get to them next. My next top 10 list is going to be my top 10 favorite Pokemon that resemble dogs, and there are certainly a lot of them, so make sure to stay tuned. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, that way you'll get to see all of our latest reviews and Pokemon videos, and even our weekly podcast show. Make sure to like the video and share it with all of your friends as well. Thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you next time. And as always, stay dandy, baby. These things are impossible to keep closed.